Today we may see instability, but soon we will have the days where the angry mobs rumble the earth underneath them. What we are seeing right now is the EU destruction that has begun. You came here for the truth, so let me unveil that for you. We have so many things to cover today. I want to try and focus on the EU, obviously being a hot topic right now. But first, let's get into this. Alan Greenspan is actually an analyst quoting him, and he's talking about the quantitative easing, the zero interest rate policies, and basically said, we really cannot exit this without some significant market event. Obviously, he's talking about a crash that could occur. And the way he said this is that if they are to exit this policy, now, will they ever exit the policy? Will they engage in a QE4, QE5, and so on? Well, it really seems like they're going in that direction. So we'll have to see how it all plays out. Now, globally, we are seeing every country essentially involved in some sort of either low interest rate policy or zero interest rate policy, and some form of quantitative easing, a TARP type bailout, a stimulus package essentially. They're all doing it on some level. In fact, I'll show you some of that in a moment. So let's move on right here. This is very interesting. It's all connected. ECB's Draghi wants to buy bonds, but who will sell? And that's the question that they're facing right now, because of course the way that this scheme that they've really conjured up has to involve those countries that want to sell off their bonds, but it seems like some of them aren't really willing to do so. This is a Reuters article. You can read it for yourself here, but essentially this is the problem with the schemes that they've set up. They don't build up real economies. They don't actually try and reduce the real unemployment rate. They just print up money and give it to banks. And that's the real failure here. Or do you have a central bank that gives it to the other countries around the world, and in the ECB giving it to these EU countries? It's not going to work. It doesn't work. It never has. And of course, you can see the Grinch here in this image below, and he seems like he has a lot on his mind. Surely he does. Now, for those who don't know the way this works, I'm using the Fed as an example. This is a diagram from my book, but it applies to essentially all of the central banks. And this is the US sells its debt to the Fed, and the Fed is essentially left with a pile of IOUs. Because if you go back to this diagram right here, it's showing you the Federal Reserve printing up out of thin air the $100 bill, gives it to the US, and the US says, I owe you. And surely the Fed takes that money and puts it on its balance sheet. And of course, you have a pile of these IOUs all left over. Now, eventually, the thought is that, may not be known to everybody, but essentially, they believe that at some point, someone's going to buy this pile of garbage and take it off their hands. But who in their right mind is really going to do this when you can't even get them to sell off the current debt they have? And the Federal Reserve, for example, can't even expand any further without it causing a problem, but they continue to do so, and you're already mathematically impossible to pay it back. What else is there left with other than to continue their policies until everything crashes down? Now, I was telling you about this right here, and that is essentially showing you the different countries and how they are engaging on the different levels of monetary easing or perhaps contractionary measures. So you can see at the top there, Russia is actually contracting, and the very end of the spectrum at the bottom, you see, for example, Japan is engaging in extreme expansionary measures. Also in there is Canada, Australia, the UK, the US, of course, and so on. And you could, take a look at this for yourself further, but essentially trying to show you that most of the nations are in fact expanding, whether it's mild expansion or whether it's actually expansion. And you will see the difference between those contractions. And the big economies of the world, it seems, for the most part, are engaging in these expansionary measures. So let's move on right here. Germany, one of the countries that they said is doing so well, consistently being reported as one of the strongest nations in Europe. And look at this out of Newsweek. Poverty in Germany is at its highest since the reunification of the country in 1990, with 12.5 million residents now classified as poor. Can you believe this? 12 million, over 12 million people are actually considered poor in Germany. And this is one of the countries that they continually purport to be doing so well. Look at them. They're the shining example of how well the EU can do and all of this business that they talk about. But of course, when you have one nation that's suffering, and then two, and then three, and then four, eventually the contagion catches on. And that's when you get the destruction. That's when things begin to crumble. And like I said, you will hear and feel the rumble of the angry mobs as these poverty numbers continue to increase. This right here, poverty on the rise despite growing economy. They're talking about the UK. This article is out of the Telegraph. Can you believe this? 18 million people cannot afford adequate housing as poverty rises from 14 to 33%. You can read the article for yourself once again, but you're looking at the UK, you're looking at Germany. I'm trying to focus here on Europe, in particular the EU, but essentially just trying to show you in this article, it's not just one country. We are feeling this all over the world. There's so much poverty right now. Child poverty is at record highs right now. You are having food inflation obviously being a huge problem for virtually every country around the world, and this is not getting any better. In fact, it's getting worse. So these statistics are very, very crucial to look at. And at the same time, you have all this poverty, and then of course you have this maximum disparity that is occurring on the very right side, employee compensation as a percentage of GDP. Since 1970, essentially, it's been declining, a significant decline. And of course, previous to that, since about the Great Depression, things were increasing, in fact. And then about 1970, things have been significantly decreasing. And then you go to the left side of this, and you see the after-tax corporate profits as a percentage of GDP, and it is just getting higher and higher and higher. The big businesses, those who are basically funding the government, lobbying the government, they have their alumni in the government, they're doing better than ever. But you as an individual are in fact becoming more poor as the days go on. And that's the way that they're actually arranging this. This is all by design. And they want it like that because essentially the more poor you are, the more dependent you are on the government structure. And they're doing so very, very well. They can do it by methods of deflation in certain areas and inflation in other areas. And isn't it such a coincidence that food is inflating in price, electricity is inflating in price, but real wages are actually deflating? And of course, this is essentially really hurting from both sides. I'll move on right here. This is basically just trying to show you the 50 stocks with the largest number of hedge fund investors. And Apple, and you see American Airlines and Facebook and Microsoft, Google, and so on and so forth. And I just wanted to note this because essentially we have big corporations that are able to spend all of this money to pump up the stock market, and you have the central banks around the world who have the incentive program to buy up shares in the US stock market. But the real individual, they're not making any money. They're not really invested much in the stock market other than indirectly through pension funds and so on, their mutual funds. But really, that's really small amounts of money compared to the investment companies. And that's the difference that we're seeing here. Yes, they can print up all this money that they want. They could send it out to the banks and the major corporations, give them the bailouts, give them everything they need. But the real economy itself is dying. We're seeing that very clearly right now in Europe, especially. And take a look at this. Revealed Swiss account secret of HSBC chief. And right here, leaked files covering 2005 to 2007 show bank chief executive sheltered $5 million of his own money at this Panama company with Swiss HSBC account. We had the scandal that went on. I actually covered it here on the channel. And essentially, these individuals are able to shelter all of their money. They don't have to pay tax. You look at the mega corporations, they're never paying tax. If they pay any tax, they pay such a small amount compared to what you and I have to pay. So of course, corporate profits are increasing and they're inflating in that regard, and the deflation is occurring in our real wages. So this is how a collapse forms, when the real wealth declines and the phony wealth increases. That is exactly what's occurring today, and it doesn't seem to be stopping anytime soon. The poverty is increasing, food inflation is increasing, and we have a major disaster on our hands. The only policies that they have left are to continue with their quantitative easing program, and of course with the zero or near zero interest rate policies. I just wanted to note that I just did an interview with SGT Report. I'm sure you know him. You're probably already on that channel as well. And of course, if you are, stay tuned, because possibly by the time you read or watch this video, the interview will be posted, and I will, if he gets it up there quickly, other than that, I will of course post it down on my main channel page. You can scroll down a bit and you will see the interviews that I've done, and as soon as I can, I'll post a link up there. I'm sure you would really enjoy the two of us getting together once again. Now, of course, don't forget to become a subscriber on here. We're heading towards 17,000 subscribers. And of course, I want you to be one of those. And don't forget to become an insider, because the insiders is where I give out all my best intel for free. That is available at themoneygps.com. You just scroll down to the bottom, fill in your email address, and you get occasional emails from me with good, short, concise info.